This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by IFA. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is August 20th, 2024, and I have live here of IFA. He runs IFA, and I wanted to have you on the show to talk to you about the 100th anniversary of the show. Hi, Life. How are you?
Hi, Miriam. I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So Leif Lindner, as I said, is, the CEO of IFA Management. And, this is a big year for you guys. You're going to have 100 years of IFA. That's incredible to me. It's an expo about basically consumer electronics and technology. And it started in 1924. So how has it evolved since then? Can you give us a feel for, where we have been, where we are today, and where do you think we're going with IFA?
Yes, I can, of course. First of all, I had to admit that I like your German pronunciation of my name. It sounds perfect. It's funny.
Oh, well, thank you.
And it's, I think, quite interesting because not many shows have 100 years of heritage without being outdated. IFA is one of them. That is what we want to show this year. So 100 years of history means also a lot of milestones. I don't want to bore you about, you all guys, about the details, but you had to have in mind, there was a war in between, the Second World War, when IFA was not happening. 1960, the first color TV was ever shown on IFA. And I think since 1971, it is internationally.
Okay.
And from beginning of 2000, it was a 1 year frequent show. Before, it was only every second year. But since 2000, it is happening yearly.
Right.
And from 2005 onwards, IFA was named International Broadcast Show. Internationale Funkausstellung.
Funkausstellung, yeah.
But in 2005, home appliances was also coming to us.
Okay. So when it started, you give me a feel for what was the context? Was it about radio transmission? Was it a professional only show? Or did it have this intent of showing, radio receivers for consumers? In 1924, radio was just getting started, yeah?
That's true. It's just getting started. And Albert Einstein was there in 1930, also showing how to use a radio and so on. That's right. It's coming.
So it was consumer-centric, facing from day one then?
That's absolutely true.
Okay. And so basically started with radio, and it was basically to promote and show what radio could do. And that's also why it's in the grounds that it's at, because there is a radio tower there, of course. So it's kind of really interesting to me because I think a lot of people don't know this part of the history, right? And so obviously you mentioned television, first color television. Radio is a big stepping stone to television. Of course, from television, we've gone to the internet, and then of course the smartphone, and then here we are, right? So obviously you've grown way past that. You've told us a little bit about the frequency of the show and how it's changed over the years. But where are you at right now? You cover, obviously, as you said, you talked about appliances. So where we've got television and internet and phones and appliances behind us. But I think you're starting to add cars too, automotive, correct?
Yeah, it's to be honest, it's a small part of IFA now. We are focusing more on digital health, and IFA Next means startups and the future technologies.
Right.
And of course, gaming as well. These are more, let's say, in our focus.
Okay, so you're looking at health and fitness and all the wearable space. And then, of course, gaming and, entrepreneurship, startup stuff, which makes a lot of sense. A lot of shows have gone that way. CES has done it as well. But I was curious because Germany is a powerhouse in automotive. Technology plays a huge part in automotive. And I don't remember seeing some, a lot of vehicles there. Last year, I believe it was Kia or Hyundai had a presence on the lawn on front of the exhibition. So yeah, interesting. So tell me a little more about what you're doing for the 100th anniversary that stands out. What's different from the last few years that I've been to since you have this 100-year milestone?
Yeah, let's start with the most important thing. IFA did a rebranding. So wherever you get in contact with IFA, our picture language, our tone of voice, our colors totally changed. So the logo is different to show everybody that there is a change in significant areas. And IFA is not anymore Internationale Funkausstellung. It is innovation for all.
Ah,
And
very
that
nice.
exactly fits, in my opinion, the current zeitgeist because it focuses, and that is our mission, to bring technology innovations to everybody.
That's great. It's a retrogram, what we call in English, an anagram that's been retroactively changed into something else, which is
That's
a
true.
really great way to rebrand yourself. I love it. Cool. And so, is there any kind of special event happening? Like, are you having a special guest? Are you having a brand new technology? Like, AI is a big player right now in tech. Are you doing something to say, when we look back at IFA 100 in 20 years, we'll remember it because of X?
Yes. I think a couple of questions. Let me start with we integrate entertainment to IFA. Who knows? I was born in Berlin, so I know IFA from the beginning as a was a small child.
Yeah, yeah.
And entertainment means we're using the summer garden. It's in between. Over 10,000 people can listen to concerts. And Brian Adams is a special guest who will open the IFA more or less at the 5th of September. It means the night before IFA officially will start. And the Chancellor of Germany will also, let's say, open it. Yeah, Brian Adams will be there. So
Mhm.
as you can imagine, being 100 years old, there is a special gala with kind of celebrities. And in the end, we have many reasons and therefore to come to IFA. And therefore we create that 100 moments, 100 years, 100 moments, I think makes sense.
That
You will
makes sense.
find a landing page. If you go on my homepage IFA, there's a link to 100 moments. And that are more than 100 reasons why you had to go to IFA and see things that you never seen before.
That is a very awesome thing. So Brian Adams, the Canadian rock star, is where you're talking about.
Yes.
Just to, for those of you who are a bit maybe younger, I don't know who Brian Adams is. Big celebrity in its time in the 80s and 90s. So also technology wise, is there something you're introducing? Like you said, you brought in gaming since the last few years. You brought in wearables and fitness and health, and are you looking at one particular thing? Are you emphasizing that one thing for the 100th anniversary?
Yeah, I think the technology that, of course, is in everybody's talking about that, but more or less, I see that every big company coming from Germany, coming from US, or coming from Asia is integrating AI in their portfolio, but not because of doing it. It's because of more or less clear use case for the consumer. So the
Yeah,
consumer will have more time for doing other things, and I think the most important technology is presenting in a way that's never been before is how products are interact with each other and how AI can bring you more value out of it. This
right.
is, I think, what stands in the middle of this year's IFA.
That's fantastic. I was just going to ask you about that because, it sounds to me from the history as we were talking about that IFA has stood here to be an exhibit for showing the technology as it is and to get people excited about technology. But also you have had a profound educational aspect, right? And to me, that's why I was going to ask you about AI because AI is really hard to understand for the consumer, right? I get it. My audience here is listening. We're very tech savvy, early adopter audience. We understand these concepts, but the average person, it's difficult right now. Technology is very politicized and it's very difficult for people to get on board with certain things, and AI is one of them. I think it's not easy for people to jump into it because it has big ramifications. I like all new technologies, there's a lot of risk for the better and for the worse. So I'm glad to hear that you're going to be educating people because I think that's the key. They can make better decisions and understand the technology better once you guide them and you put it in front of them and tell them what it does and what it doesn't do. So I'm looking forward to seeing that.
You know what? What is I also what like is really not funny but interesting is that in Germany, a lot of people discussing will AI kill my job?
Right, that's what I'm talking about, things like
Yeah,
that,
but
right?
or I can't. And what is I think what we want to show is not AI will kill your job, the person who is more aligned with AI will kill your job, but not AI itself.
Right.
And that leads to the fact that is what we want to show, that everything will be about automation and efficiency. And to bring that nearer to the consumer, innovation for all, that is what it's all about.
Right. So, in terms of other technologies, we've talked about AI, we've talked about, let's talk a little bit about the established technologies. Traditionally, if I look at myself as a, technology journalist who's done this for 20 years and traveled to all the trade shows for 20 years, the circuit that we all do every year includes CES, etc. I've noticed, we used to have more specialized shows covering smartphones. For example, this show is primarily about anything that fits in your pocket that you can take with you. And obviously the smartphone has been a big part of the show. And so I'm wondering, smartphones have grown at IFA quite a bit in the last few years, but it's still not the main focus. It feels like when I go to IFA, the main focus is still appliances, televisions, the more traditional, not necessarily mobile, but more traditional consumer electronics. Do you see that changing? Obviously gaming is going to change things a bit. You had talked about health and fitness. Wearables obviously are becoming a big part of that, and they're very mobile. Do you think that we're going to see, as in the next 5 years, more smartphone and mobile personal technology content at IFA, simply because it's an area that's growing, not because the smartphone isn't new now. It's an everyday Swiss Army knife tool that we carry. So, what are your thoughts on that? I'm curious, because obviously this is a mobile show.
Yeah. So what I can say is you're absolutely right. It's a growing area, and it's, in my opinion, also the product that will stand in the middle of how to use AI. That is also the reason why also, let's say, digital health, or for example, Samsung will re-promote their Ring that I think, as I understood, it's sold out in the US already.
Yeah.
In Europe, it's not like it in the moment, but I want to say also that gadget or that product that is, let's say, offers you maybe longevity, or let's say like that, is quite important. And I can tell you that there is a smartphone focus, for example, from brands like Samsung, who will show all of their portfolio, but also Honor, for example.
Yeah, Honor always has a big presence at your show, and that's really exciting.
And also this year they were doing an interesting keynote with Qualcomm and with Microsoft. So I think that connection is, in my opinion, also quite reasonable. And therefore, in my opinion, to be honest, that is year number one for me. But bringing also a net provider and other, let's say, mobile brands to our show or back to our show is, of course, if I'm looking forward, one target that we want to go for.
The operators you're talking about,
yes,
correct?
Operators,
yeah, okay.
sorry.
Carriers here in the US, that's what we say, but my audience knows what an operator is. That's really interesting you bring that up. I think we talk about innovation and new products, but if you look at it, some products are still with us, right? And are still very strong. Laptops are a good example. Everybody thought that with the introduction of the smartphone and the tablet, that the laptop was going to become, more of a business tool, but that's not the reality. The reality is laptops are stronger than ever. And I believe we're going to see a lot of new laptops technologies announced at IFA this year. That's exactly what I'm talking about. IFA, we still find radios at IFA, right? We still find televisions at IFA. We still find laptops at IFA. We still find smartphones at IFA. And now we're also starting to look at, the next generation of products. So that's what I enjoy about it. What would you say is for final words? How would you summarize this and tell people why they should attend? Those of you who can be in Berlin and are in the public sphere and not media like me, why should someone just go to IFA this year especially?
So having 100 years anniversary, seeing our, let's say, special exhibition that we are also doing on site gives everybody who is not addicted to electronics, but please have in mind, everybody from an industrialized country is using 8 times a day electronic product.
Yes.
So it is a product that means you had to be so IFA cares about things that you definitely, everybody of us, using every single day. And if you want to look forward for the future, because as you can imagine, everybody want to celebrate with us, so they prepare I would say, the best what they can do. So if you want to have exciting moments, then you have to come to IFA this year.
I love it. And, I think you make a good point. I think, especially for those who are local, right? It's a rite of passage if you live in Berlin. You have to go to IFA once. Why not make it your 100th anniversary, right?
Yes, that's true.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Leif, for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I hope we can have you on the show again.
Yes, thank you, Miriam, for having me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. See you next time.
See you next time.
And I've got the awesome Brian Tong here with me. Hi, Brian. How are you doing?
Miriam, we've been trying to get this done for a long time, probably more because of me, but thank you so much for having me, honestly.
Listen, I super appreciate it. I know you're super busy. I mean, you're like,
we all are.
Basically, you're like oscillating between Apple Park and Google headquarters lately, it seems. Yeah. So listen, I appreciate it. I want to chat with you a little more about Pixel. As I said, you're not like me and like a lot of my media colleagues, more Androidy. You're really kind of everywhere. Like you're also very strong relationship with Apple. So what's your general take on this lineup? Like, do you feel like to me, it feels like this might be the best lineup since they've pivoted to 6, right? 6 was a big change.
I was going to say, without sounding too drastic, not only do I think this is Pixel's best lineup that we've seen in a long time. They did sweeping changes, but it's a combination of, a page from Apple, hardware and software. But I think this is going to be the best lineup of the entire tech season from a phone standpoint. And the reason why I say that is, again, because of hardware and software. So if you look at what they put out from a hardware standpoint, it definitely has, let's call it out, shades of iPhone, right? The metal band, the curved bevel, the edge, like everything about the actual body design screams Apple. I held it in hand. It felt like an iPhone, even the weight. On the back, though, the distinguishing thing that has always made me really attracted to Google Pixel is their camera bar. So now it's like an oval, and I don't know how I feel about that yet, but they're really leaning into this more rounded camera bar, and it looks like no other phone out there. It looks like Among Us, the characters from Among Us, right, with that big old circular.
For me, it's Bender. It reminds me of Bender.
Yeah, right? But from a software standpoint, I think we both know that there's definitely been a level where phone hardware has plateaued. Most of the time now we see better improved cameras and faster processor. But what Google did with what they showed, their actual practical software features and things that don't exist on any other phone right now, from a standpoint of we can dig into them, but, call notes, screenshots, all that stuff, it makes the phone feel different. It makes the phone feel more powerful. And I'm not one who instantly is like, oh, I got to have AI features. I just want features that make sense and are practical to me and consumers. But also, if they happen to be backed by AI, then that's where the magic happens. And I think a feature from, I guess it was last year, like Magic Eraser, or 2 years ago, that was one of those features that required some level of AI, but no one has to know that. But it was just such a consumer-friendly, seamless feature. And I think Google's actually nailing that right now. And of course, they have their own issues in other ways we can talk about. But from a standpoint of the design of the line, I think their Pixel 9 Pro Fold is the biggest change we've seen from one generation to another in a foldable. I was personally disappointed with Samsung's lineup this year only because it felt like they were just kind of doing Me Too stuff, and we saw what they did with their AirPods and Apple Watch.
It's actually interesting you brought that up, because I was just going to say, as you were starting to talk about, the design, like that's the thing that I'm a long time Pixel user as my main. The reason for that, a lot of it is the software feature and having kind of like the Google Vision for Android, which I think is kind of the reference in my opinion.
Agreed.
But then at the same time, I was with Nexus before that too. And so it's like, I'm also a little bummed because I'm like, as much as I love this new industrial design, I haven't touched the phones, but from everything I hear, they're really great in hand, and I believe it. Like, I'm just a little concerned that, Samsung with the S23 series and the S24, and now Google with the 9 series are basically making iPhones, like in terms of the over design. The camera pod is what distinguishes you, and Samsung's not doing a very good job with that. Let's face it. It's been very boring unless you have an S24 Ultra.
Correct.
And so I'm like, that bums me out a little bit because I'm like, I don't want phones to be boring. I don't want phones to become just a vessel for the software because, and thankfully we have the folding phones that kind of rescue us from that. And thankfully Google makes one. But I feel like it's a bit of a sellout in some ways, even though I'm happy with what I'm seeing. And of course, spec-wise, the hardware is significantly better. As you said, there's nothing to complain about. So where do you how do you feel about that? Is that a problem? Like for the average consumer, it isn't. But for us, people who really care about technology and how it evolves and how it gets better, that every phone is just becoming a copy paste job industrial design wise.
Yeah, I agree with you, Miriam. I mean, to be honest, I was excited but also disappointed because last year I felt from a hardware design point, the Pixel 8 Pro was one of the most unique phones we had seen. The way they just integrated that camera bar, and it was just felt like, ooh, this is a unique phone compared to everyone else that either just throws a camera in the top left corner, has the same boring colors. That phone and then its software features at that time distinguished it to me as, the most unique and arguably the best phone of the year from a standpoint of just being different to the tech savvy audience, right? And trying new things and pushing things in a different direction. So now when I see it have shades of iPhone, what though is weird is I'm like, of course, my primary daily driver is an iPhone. I own multiple phones to use for reviews and stuff, but
of course we all
it felt, yeah, right. It felt familiar. And I'm telling you, I was like, oh, it's kind of like an iPhone, but it doesn't have the big old dynamic island notch. You flip it over, it has the different cam bar. So I'm like, and it was really the software that makes it feel different.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, ultimately, that's what matters the most, right? You're handling the phone, you're getting a certain experience, you're getting a certain vibe. And, personally, I'm not a big fan of the Samsung vibe. I think that from a technical point of view, the phones are outstanding. Like, I recommend them to people. I have some, like, there's nothing wrong with them, but I just don't like the taste of it, the flavor of the software experience, right? One UI isn't for me. And it's the same. Like, I'm wearing the Galaxy, well, actually, I'm not today, but I'm normally wearing the Galaxy Watch Ultra, and I keep switching to then the OnePlus Watch 2. And the same with the Watch Ultra. This is a perfect example. I love the taste and the flavor of the software on this OnePlus Watch so much more than exactly the same software on the Galaxy Watch Ultra, which is the One UI-fied version of Wear OS. And so I understand that. It's the same with like if you've been an iPhone user for a long time. Oh my God, like going back to any Android is a shock, right? It's not because the phone looks different per se. It's just the whole experience, right? And that's also what worries me about our industry, especially in North America, because like with young people universally pretty much adopting iPhones, like where is there room for Android? And could you see young people see this Pixel and go, oh, I kind of dig this. I'm going to use this because of the AI features, because they're not like in your face AI, because they're really useful AI, unlike some of the other competition. And then mind you, Apple's doing the same thing. But I think that like with RCS coming to the iPhone, do you think we have some hope here to see a few more young people on, say, Pixels?
Well, so I love how you bring this up because I have nieces and nephews, and RCS is probably going to be the biggest shift. Like the iPhone will come out, it'll have all this, whatever new stuff and improvements. But I think really the most significant feature on that phone will be the fact that they open up things to RCS. Now, when I talk to young people, they're not, and my nieces and nephews range anywhere from college all the way to junior high right now.
Right.
And at one time, two of them had Android phones at one time around 6th, 7th grade. But the blue bubble thing got them. And it's kind of amazing. It sounds stupid, but we understand what it was like to be back then. And of course, you probably would have switched over to blue bubbles. But I think when you talk about, is there still a place for Android? Absolutely. But when we're talking about a younger generation, there will be a point, well, maybe. And we know that the adoption rate and where people stand with which platform they align with and the ecosystem they're in has, for the most part, stagnate and flatten out. We might see maybe a percentage point or two move, but we're not going to see anytime soon unless someone really F's it up, like 10% of iPhone users all of a sudden switch to Android, right? So we're playing here on the margins. But what I think that Google is doing, and they have the luxury of doing, is because they have so many resources from other buckets, they've shown us that they're willing to try and take risks. And even if they're not selling the most units, right? But they're willing to keep on kind of chipping away at this And I think, this Pixel 9 Pro and 9 Pro XL, when people actually use them and hold them and play with what makes them different, they're going to be like, I've seen more comments than any comments on my Pixel videos of like, this looks really good. Where in the past, it's been Pixel sucks, Google sucks, I'm never going to switch. Now I'm starting to see it's a minor shift. I'm telling you, it's minor, but more comments leaning in the direction of, wow, Apple better watch out. Wow. Right. Things like that start are seeds that are being planted, but haven't been reaped yet.
But do you think that maybe is an unconscious thing because they're seeing an iPhone in terms of physical shape until you turn the screen on? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I don't know that one.
I'm kind of curious if that's kind of like placebo effect in a way. But you also bring up something really interesting, which I think is the fact that Google is the only company in North America that we deal with. Like in China, there's Xiaomi, there's Huawei that has an entire ecosystem beyond phones. Like, yes, Samsung has that too. They have vacuum cleaners and televisions, and they have, dishwashers and washers and dryers, but they don't have the home automation stuff quite yet. Like, you never see a Samsung doorbell. You never see, a Samsung smart speaker. They did one, right? And I think that was kind of a mess.
It never came out. The Bixby speaker
never came out.
That's exactly
right. Exactly. It never came out. So my point is that, yes, they don't do appliances, which Samsung does. So you could argue that Samsung maybe is doing it too. But I feel like Google, like the fact that you can see, previews on your Pixel Watch Live of your Nest doorbell is, the kind of integration that even Apple dreams of, right? Because Apple doesn't make a doorbell. Like, I think Apple obviously has some really strong partners that work closely with them. Like the whole Find My network from Apple is a good example how you can dominate that really quickly if you have the right partners. Because, of course, the core devices all have Find My and there's the tag, but everything else, is being driven by like the Van Moof bike that have Find My, like et cetera. Right? So I think Google as their own equivalent now, and I actually got the Moto tag recently, the one they announced at the Moto Razr event, and I put that in my bag to try it out. But I know I'm not going to get necessarily quite the same success at recovering things with that tag because there's just not as many Android users out there versus, and you have to be an Android user on a relatively recent phone with relatively recent software for, you to walk by a stolen Android tag and find it, right? So I don't know, unless I'm wrong and unless they kind of unified and it's all compatible with Apple stuff now. I need to kind of dig into that more. It's not really my area of expertise. What's your take on that? Do you think about the ecosystem a lot when you think of Google?
Well, I'm partially in the Google ecosystem because, from a smart home standpoint, which I was gonna, right when you started talking about, I was gonna piggyback on it. Apple's smart home situation is just not the best, right? They had announced a while back that Matter would allow a lot more compatibility with devices. But guess what? A lot of these next generation devices, some are using Matter, but there's still a lot of old stuff that people use. Like, remember, home, we don't upgrade our homes every year, 2 year, 3 year. Once we get a camera, that's the camera we're probably going to have in our home for the next 5 to 10 years, right? So
I'm still using my original Ring camera as a doorbell cam, and it's connected wired, so it's perfectly fine. There's no reason for me to do anything and upgrade. You know what I'm saying? It's like 10 years old now or something.
So for me, when I think about the smart home, my smart home is a hodgepodge of Amazon and Google. My camera system is all Nest. My thermostat is Nest, right? So, you're talking to someone who lives in the Apple ecosystem, but when it comes to the smart home system, I live in Amazon, but mostly primarily Google's. And so this is a spot where, Apple has really, you can only do so much as a company, all right? But they have chosen not to, try or really push hard enough. And I feel like as time has gone on, we've started to see Google rise higher and higher as maybe the smart home ecosystem that might make the most sense here in the US. Now, the other thing is, of course, data, privacy. We all know that Apple excels in that. But even with Apple being let's say, the leader in the mindshare of we care about your privacy, they have not nailed down the smart home, a smart home solution. And so
they haven't.
I think, and guess what? People jumped on Amazon devices because they were cheaper. People jumped on Google devices because they were cheaper and they were doing things. So there's nothing right now and in the near future that's going to say, Brian, switch over all your stuff to the Apple ecosystem for smart home if they make my current stuff compatible and it seamlessly flies through, cool. But there's no need for me to change my whole system just because Apple all of a sudden releases a camera.
Apple made a doorbell that was significantly better, and my doorbell died, my Ring, I would probably consider it. Mm-hmm. But honestly, right now, if my doorbell dies, I'll go to a Nest doorbell.
That's what I was going to say.
I'm more invested in the Google ecosystem overall anyway. It's just that, it was a review unit. I got it 10 years ago. They didn't want it back. So guess what? It's still on my door. Yeah. So the point is that, like you, I have a mismatch of like Amazon-based assistant controlled devices. I've got a bunch of, like these LED lights right now are on Nest, but doorbells on Ring. So it's like on Amazon, it's a mess.
But you're not unique. That's not unique to you.
But that's my point. Like I contextualize it too, right? Like it's like I'm like, oh, I want to turn on these lights. Oh, that's Alexa, right? Or that's Google, right?
Yes.
And so I think this is definitely some area that I think Google is very strong at, and I think this Pixel 9 lineup, and including the watches in there, and I'm including the buds in there as well, is adding to that, right? And I don't know if you saw the very little brief vignette interviews that Joanna Stern published about the event that she spoke to Rick Osterloh, right? So, they're like the little snippets. And so she asked him about the earbuds and like, she says like, isn't it like the movie Her? And he gets all excited and he starts talking about it. And then she goes, you know how that movie ended, right?
So how did that movie end? I know the context of it because I've seen a bunch of... I don't want to spoil
it, but it doesn't end good. It's not in favor of the human. So the bottom line is that Osterloh was kind of like caught like, and I'm like, I think honestly, I've experienced this and noticed this in Silicon Valley, somebody who's there all the time, that like they just don't understand, like they don't understand Her, like the movie, and they don't understand that the end wasn't a good thing. Like it's not a good thing. Most people, you don't want that. Like
here's the thing, what you touch on. Okay, so I thought that I even referenced in my first look video, like it was shades of Her. That I was experiencing, because obviously seeing over time, you just know what the movie's about. But I think you make a really interesting point about Silicon Valley, because I think you have a lot of obviously smart people, but they're not always definitely connected to the conscious of like real people. And so their idea is like, we're going to make the coolest thing we can. We're going to push the limits. But, there's a aspect of a moral compass that kind of has to come into play, specifically with AI type platforms and devices that still is not taken seriously enough. Like, right, we jokingly will always say, like the Terminator's coming, like, they're coming to take us over. And in a funny way, I'm not saying that's going to happen anytime soon, right? Computer intelligence will dominate mankind, but we're not taking the proper precautions seriously enough, maybe because it happened in sci-fi movies, to really vet how far should we push. I think it was one of the head researchers of Google's AI department actually left Google AI to become a champion, to be more of warning people like of the concerns, because they're not being responsible about this. So that is, to your point, when he kind of is like, Rick Osterloh's like, it's because they haven't thought about it. Like they're just like, I want to make the coolest AI possible, right?
Kind of unbelievable to me. And it's so Silicon Valley, right? Like it's like you shoot first, ask question later kind of thing.
Yes.
Ask forgiveness, not permission. The problem is that when you get to a point where you won't get forgiveness, like the machine doesn't care, right? Like, and look, I'm a nerd. I'm an engineer. That's my background. I worked in video games. I made video games for 20 years before I was a tech journalist. Like, I love the tech and I love like seeing it advance, but I also feel that, people have taken such a back seat, and, the consideration of technology and its effect on people, that I'm always concerned about that. But, going back to, we talked about the earbuds a little bit. I really have never had an issue with the Google Pixel Buds. They've always sounded great, had decent features, but they're never my go-to. And I think part of it is the fit. I don't like the stubby thing that, Samsung also used to do. And everybody's gone to stem head earbuds now, which I really like much better. My most comfortable right now, one of my favorites are the Nothing Ear, the new ones. There's also the Ear A, which are kind of the cheaper version of that. Both of them, either of them I'll take. They both sound great, have great noise canceling, great battery, and also, for me, great comfort, great fit. And, I'm a bit of an audiophile, because when I worked in video games, I focused on audio. So I'm kind of like, like Brandon Lee a little bit, like really focused on audio.
Have that like
and so I got that critical ear. And so I have to say that the pixels have never been an issue in that regard for me. But I think these look that like they might be something I want to try out because they're a little smaller. At least it's what they look like. And fit has always been a bit of an issue. Like even the Galaxy Buds 3 Pro that you just came out, I have a review in it, and I would probably say they're the best. Like if money is no contest of what's available in North America right now, they're probably the best earbuds overall. But fit-wise, I still feel that the ear are better. Like the sound quality on the Samsung, I think is slightly better than the ear, but the ear fits better for me. And I'm going to always put fit at the first because that's,
Yes.
you want comfort. Like I don't wear them for super long. I don't wear them on flights. I wear these on flights. But like I would rather have for the 10, 20, 50-minute walk that I'm taking to go to the store or whatever, I'd rather have comfort. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on them. Have you tried them? Are you a fan of the buds from Pixel? Would you prefer something else?
I mean, I like the buds from the Pixel. I think I didn't try on the new, they were talking about how the twist to fit to kind of secure and lock in a little better, how that is. I didn't get to try that because I don't like putting on earbuds at a demo room in a So your answer is I have not actually tried them yet because of logistics.
When we were at the Samsung event, they're like, "What do you mean you didn't try them?" I'm like, "Dude, disgusting. I'm at an event. I'm not trying them. Like, I'll wait for my reviews."
Yeah, I think aesthetically they look a little smaller. They look nice. Again, that is unfortunately a product that you really have to try first before we really give our opinions on it. But what I think is interesting, and I know we're going to touch on it when you talk about the earbuds, is Gemini Live is fascinating to me with what they showed. I don't, but just going back to the earbuds, we'll see how it is. But they've made major strides in all their product lines this year. Like you and I kind of talked about right off the top. This is the kind of the biggest, boldest across the line design change we've seen from them. And Google's at a point now where because the hardware has plateaued, now they're letting their software shine and be like, hey, this is what we're doing different. So I think they're in a really good position. Again, the scales are not going to tilt and 20% of Apple users are going to jump over, but I think they're going to make a little chip this year. I really do. Because I'm compelled.
If you look at earbuds, the reality is this: you're not going to, again, if most people, including Android users, are on AirPods Pro most likely nowadays, and they're perfectly fine. Like they're not my favorite by a long shot, but I think they are very well balanced. They're comfortable. Great noise reduction, great sound quality. They're not the best at anything. I think they're worse than the ear from nothing. I think they're worse than the Galaxy Buds. But you have them, and they're good. Unless you lose one or whatever, you're not even going to consider going to something else. Like I have the OnePlus Buds Pro 3, the new ones, and I can't talk about their sound quality or whatever, but what I'm trying to say is that they are another contender in that really high end. But, when you look at it, the only ones that cost a lot are really the AirPods and the Samsungs. The Google ones are reasonable. The Nothing ones are reasonable. The OnePlus ones are reasonable. So, if you're, first of all, 90% people who have AirPods are not even going to think twice and get another pair of AirPods if they lose them.
Yep.
Secondly, if they are going to think twice, now they have some good options, but price is pretty spread and feature-wise pretty spread in terms of they're all giving you about the same experience, but again, fit is different on each of them. Noise canceling is a little different on each of them. Sound quality is a little different. So, where do you go and how do you guide people there? So I'm not sure even... unless they bundle them in, which is, I think, what Samsung, the only reason you see Samsung Buds out there is because people bought a Samsung phone and they got the Buds given for free. So I'm thinking right now, hopefully that Google is going to bundle these because if they want people to use them, right?
You're right. You make a great point on that. I mean, stylistically, I think they look really cool, right? I mean, I think the pop of color, and they look really cool. But the biggest thing, we know, it's all. I think also not. I think. I mean, we know this. It's all about ecosystem. Those AirPods, if you're in that ecosystem, there's no reason to do anything different, right? But you can use AirPods in the other platforms. But though I would argue, let's say
they're not as good. Yeah.
The ecosystem hooks for Galaxy Buds and others aren't as strong as ecosystem hooks in Apple. So that's why you see people using AirPods that work on these other platforms, because if there was one Android super ecosystem hook thing, then you would, right? Now, let's say Gemini Live becomes the de facto voice assistant and
Yeah.
Pixel Buds tap into that. I'm not saying that they would limit it to just Pixel Buds, but that's the type of ecosystem hook with a software feature that is a must-have for a platform that gets you that stickiness that Apple has with their AirPods.
Yeah, they got to watch out now with that antitrust lawsuit that's hovering. They can't limit
Right?
features to a
Right.
single platform. But the other thing I want to briefly touch on is the Pixel Watch. I wore the first one because I had to try it out because, I used to work at Pebble, so smartwatch is a thing for me.
Pebble's what started the smartwatch revolution.
I know, right? So then version 2, I skipped because I was like, there were more interesting smartwatches out there for me. And I was like, it's not enough of a change. Like, I know the battery life was a lot better. It was much better sorted. It was a better piece of hardware, despite having pogo pins instead of wireless charger. But this Gen 3's got me excited because for me, it's the size. The reason I didn't go where the second Pixel Watch was, it looks ridiculous. And this is the OnePlus Watch 2. Again, looks perfectly fine on my wrist, but that tiny thing on my wrist just looks like I have like an Apple AirTag on my wrist or something. It doesn't work. So I'm like really happy to see the larger size finally. And that's, remembering my experience and also the accuracy and the experience of the Fitbit ecosystem. I just wish they combine the two, like Fit and Fitbit. Like, it bugs me that I have to install a separate app on my phone to use a Pixel Watch and get all the benefits. Like, what's your take on the watches?
Well, for the watches speak directly to why Google is going to or has done and impressed people so well this year. Much like their Pro XL phone. Remember, before the Pro XL was like the only option, you had to get the super large screen. Now they did 2 sizes.
I know that's really amazing because many people want a Pro phone that's a smaller phone like Apple makes.
Yes.
And I mean, smaller, let's be relative. 6.3 inches is not small, but it's definitely something that Google did not have in its ecosystem before. Yeah. And I think you nailed it. This is a big step.
Right. That's a big step. And so they did the same thing with the watch. They're like, okay, none of the rinky-dink watch. We know that, but that was clearly a limiting factor for someone like you who lives in the ecosystem, who was like, I'm going to wait until you actually make a larger watch face. And they did. So Google, like some companies do and sometimes they don't, they really listened this year, right? A regular size Pro phone, a larger size watch face, and then a foldable that was thinner and lighter. Like, these are sometimes common sense things that companies just don't do, you know, and it typically takes 2 years from a plan to get implemented for that product to finally see the light of day. Not a year, but Google had at least enough foresight where from year to year, they knew, and they weren't smelling their own butts and thinking like, we're making the greatest stuff. They knew, and at least they were responsive. Like, I like when I see that from companies because it tells me that, okay, they know where their weakness is.
Oh, they've grown up so much.
Right?
I mean, if you look at Pixel 6 was a huge step forward.
Yes.
And I mean, around Pixel 5, like I switched from 3XL to 6 Pro. And the reason for that is the 4 was a great phone for XL, but it had the Soli radar instead of a fingerprint sensor, and none of the apps supported it. And every banking app I had, everything, I only had to enter the PIN, and it was a pain in the ass. And I was like, I want a fingerprint sensor. So I stuck with my 3XL. And then the 5 came out, and I was like, I don't want a small phone. Like, I'm the reverse, right? So I had the review units, I had the devices, I used them on the side, but not as my main. And then, by the time the 6 Pro came out, my 3XL was a pain. Like, I was just like, I'm so ready for a new phone. And so that was a huge step forward. And I felt they finally were playing with the big boys. But now, as you said, one of the things that Samsung does every time so well, and the Chinese do every time so well, is they have such a breadth of product. I'm not even just talking about the S series from Samsung that has a small, a large, and an ultra. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fan editions. I'm talking about the A series. I'm talking about the entry-level phones that they make too in other markets, like the M series and whatever, the J series. It's like, the point is, Google only had they basically have 2 series, the A and the regular, and then the regular came in 2 sizes. Now at least we have the A, regular, the regular Pro, the big Pro, and then the folding phone. And it feels much more competitive. It feels like they're going, okay, put our gloves on,
that's what
go
I'm
into
saying.
the boxing ring.
That's
let's
what
go,
I'm saying.
Right? And so to me, that's really exciting. And seeing that bigger watch has me going like, okay, so I think I'm going to wear this for a while this year if I can get my hands on one. The folding phone, you touched on it in the intro a little bit. I believe this will be my next phone because this is a funny thing, Brian. I like the flip phones right away, the folding flips. Like I got it. I was like, oh, cool. Like, a normal phone that flips in half. But the user experience wasn't there to take advantage of the big screen for me. And until recently. And because of that, I was like not so big on the book style folding phone because I was like, Android tablets kind of suck, right? So you're getting an Android tablet. Yeah, you get a bigger screen, but do I want to just run a one app full screen or do I want to do something fancier? So I couldn't quite place the use case. And also the fact that Samsung dominated that area with the tall and skinny industrial design didn't work for me. So of course I had access to the Chinese phones because, I get them all, but that doesn't really work that well as a daily drive in the US with the bands and stuff. So when the OnePlus Open came out, that was the phone that finally made me realize, okay, I can do a folding phone that's a book style because now I have an interface that lets me multitask. Even though I don't personally use that feature that much, it's nice to have. And then, of course, a sexy phone that works well in North America, blah, blah, blah. So all year I've been carrying my Pixel Pro, 7 Pro and then 8 Pro, and then the Open. And then, obviously I have a Galaxy and an iPhone in my bag at all times. And now I want to merge the two. And so that's why I'm super excited about the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, because it's probably going to solve my problem of one phone does it all for me. My only concern, and I think, you touched on this a little bit earlier too, is that yes, all of these phones are competitive, but the G4 Tensor chip is still not competitive. We obviously are going to wait for the embargo to lift to find out the benchmarks and stuff, but everybody's on the same page here that this is just a slightly improved G3. You're not going to get quite the same radio performance, like, signal strength and connectivity quality that you get on a Qualcomm chip or a MediaTek chip. You're not going to get the same thermal performance when you play games. Now, to me, does that matter? Yes and no. I don't really care about the gaming performance. I don't care about having the fastest chip in my phone. So for that, I'm fine. But it's the radio performance that always gets me on my Pixel. I'll give you an example. Pixel 8a, right? Team Pixel sent me a device and I love it. I love all the A phones. It's totally like the only phone you need, in my opinion. But, I split my time between San Francisco and Vancouver, Canada. I'm in Vancouver right now. And I put my Canadian SIM in whatever second phone. Like it's not my main phone. All my calls come into my US phone. So of course I roam on T-Mobile IP here. Of course I got all the free roaming in the world. But the reality is my phone is still faster with the local SIM. If I'm like doing a speed test or something, right? So I often tether my Canadian SIM, and use the data from that. And I said, I've got the Pixel 8a. Let's put my Canadian SIM in that and use it. Well, here's the thing. Because it's a small phone and the thermals of the G3 are not very good and the radio performance isn't very good, even though the bands are all compatible with Canada and everything, it would get warm in my pocket just on hotspot. Like you don't see that on a Qualcomm phone. Like that never happens on a Qualcomm phone these days. And that's what I'm talking about. It's a minor thing, but your battery is decreasing faster, blah, blah, blah. So I hope that, it's better on the G4. And more importantly, I know that Google is going to stay with Samsung as their partner, and I think we're going to get a G5. And rumors are it's going to be really great for the, Pixel 10 series. But, oh man, I wish I could make a Snapdragon equipped Pixel 9. Like that would just
I think that like anything, look, what you say is the bane of all of our like existences. Each platform excels in different ways, but there's never been the ultimate Voltron phone that we could take the best antenna.
Well, some people would argue that Samsung,
the best port. I mean, okay, but then like you touched upon it. I'm not here to bash them, but the One UI, I've never been on board with it.
Yeah, same here. It's a taste thing. It's like it tastes icky to me. It's not bad. I can live with it.
And
but it's kind of like, when you don't like cilantro and you have cilantro in your mouth. It's exactly how I feel when it was One UI. Like
this is the title of the show. One UI tastes like cilantro. ... If you like it. Just kidding. But here's the thing, right?
Brian, you need to use that on your headlines for the next.
I'm not going to. But when you talk about all this, all the stuff that you mentioned, I think that people tend to, no matter what, they get a little bored with their phones and they want to try something different, right? how many, I mean, I can't tell you how many people on the iPhone world, I make this joke that we're on the iPhone 12 SSSS right now because it has felt like that. Okay. But
True.
so there's people that are now saying, well, I want to see something different. And they look at Google like, oh my God, this looks awesome. And it is, trust me, I've been using it. It's awesome. The concerns that you talk about, 100% valid. I think some of those concerns affect the super technophile, right?
Oh yeah.
But they don't really affect the general consumer. And the reality is that, yes, what we love sometimes is actually different than what the general consumer loves, right? And so that's right. I mean, we've seen that with Apple, we've seen that with other companies. So it's kind of up to Google to figure out how they're going to target that general consumer. And I can tell you from anecdotal evidence that my mom, when my mom brings up something about tech, I know it's hit right. She said, "Wow, have you seen that magic eraser feature on Google? Because they advertise it relentlessly on TV." I don't know, especially if you're an NBA fan. Google has a partnership with the NBA.
That's right.
It is on every single commercial break. But the fact that it's resonated with my mom tells me something, right? I use my mom as a barometer of what the general audience is seeing, feeling, or even aware of.
Yeah.
And that's important to know. So to your point about what they're going to decide and do, heat antenna, like we can always, I just feel in general, the hardware on phones is so much better and more. Again, there are some ups and downs, but typically it's flattened out a lot. It's not completely flat, but the hardware now, we're at top tier level with hardware.
Oh,
that right,
universally.
top tier.
I mean, and actually what got me really most excited, as an aside, Brian, is that you can now buy a phone like the Nothing CMF Phone 1, right? The $200 phone, and it doesn't suck. Mm-hmm. You can buy a Pixel 8a at $500 and you're getting basically a flagship experience from 2 years ago.
Right.
Like we're finally at the point where even a Moto G can be like some of the Gs, not all of them, are actually decent phones. Yeah. And of course, never mind the stuff from China, right? The Redmis and the Pocos and the Realmes, those kind of more affordable brands that you see in India, like that are from the big players, Xiaomi and BBK Group. Those things are insane. And I think I agree with you. Like, my spouse, my producer as well, they're technical enough that they, they're not like your mom, but they're not like me or you, right? They're not like tech-savvy early adopter that's going to want the latest. But they love the idea of the flip phone. So, since we live in 2 countries, they have an iPhone as their main for the US, and then they have a Moto Razr 2023, the Plus, the last year's flagship Moto Razr. And they had a Galaxy Flip before that, and they love their flip phone. They hate Android, though. Yeah. They constantly complain about Android. But so I think my point is that there are people who are looking for different form factors. There are people who see something and go like, I want that, right?
The biggest obstacle for people getting foldables right now, or a foldable with a large screen form factor like a Pixel 9 Pro Fold, is price. Consumers are price sensitive. If we can get one, and we will get there, but it's not happening anytime soon. If we can get a foldable like the Pixel Fold, or like what some of these other competitors, the Honor Magic V3, all these other competitors that are out there, if we can get it here in the US for maybe, let's say, $11.99 or close to that, people will get a foldable. If it's like, maybe, I know it's not there yet, but if it's like $200 or $300 more than the top tier base price model for an XL phone, right? Then people will do it. But right now, we're still at that $17.99, $18.99 price point.
Yeah, but I think the book style is not the one that's going to be the popular one. I think the flip one is, and I think that
Moto, like the little hand flip one.
With the current Razr 2024 non-plus, the Razr baby Razr minus, or whatever you want to call it, that phone at $699, I think, is hitting that price point. And even better, if you can deal with a smaller front screen, last year's Razr minus 2023 is now $399 on sale on Moto's website. I mean, at that price, like, you can get a decent flip phone for, with very few compromises for $399. So I think, what I want to see is Apple make a flip phone.
Well, I was just going to say that.
Not a folding style, but a flip, because I think that they could price it $1,100, $1,200 over the price of a Z Flip 6. And still get away with it because they're Apple, and the subsidies on the carriers are going to make it so people buy it anyway. And I think that would be the solution, I think, for Flip to become popular. And I hate to say it because, Apple...
I was going to say, wow. I was going to literally piggyback on that idea before you even said anything. I'm like, look, we really know foldables are going to take off once Apple makes a foldable. It's so frustrating to be like, but other companies have been doing it for like 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
But the consumer, again, not the tech savvy, the general consumer conscious person is Apple's target market, and they have so much marketing muscle and power to dictate narrative of what is the next thing. And I will say consumers have gone smarter and are like, all right, Apple 12 SSSS. Okay, we're kind of like, what are you going to actually show us? So you would think this would be a ripe time for like something like a Z Flip 6 or, Moto flip phone to really slide in, but it just hasn't, because people are like, how many times have you seen comments, or I've seen comments, I'm just waiting for Apple to make a flip phone? I kid you not. And so the demand is there, and it will help push the category. And I think also the reality is a lot of these companies, of course, everyone would like to be in that type of position, but they, in other respects, they hope that Apple gets into it because that actually generates more sales for them too.
Right,
it really does.
Course. Yeah, I know. I'm actually curious. Like, there's a lot of debate out there right now whether Apple's actually gonna do it or not, or do a foldable phone at all, because I know it doesn't quite meet their standard yet in terms of durability, in terms of design, but that's the point. I expect Apple to fix these problems, right? That's their thing. Like, they come in. We had front-facing cameras on Nokia phones that were in Symbian back in the day. It took until the iPhone, the 4 to get a front camera. Was it the 5 even to get a front camera, and then got FaceTime, right?
Yeah.
And then people are like, oh, and I'm like, guys, I've been using Windows Mobile and Symbian devices back in 2004 that had front cameras and could do video calls. We literally did video calls. Like, it's not like rocket science. It's just that Apple just made it a thing,
Yep.
And good for them, because it needed to become a thing, because it was harder to use before. Listen, I want to talk briefly before we wrap up about this other thing. You did a video the other day about the Rivian kitchen, whatever it's called.
Yeah, the travel kitchen.
Yeah, so I'm curious, I'm a big EV person. I've been driving electric for 6 years now, and I review EVs and car tech for Tech Radar, and obviously I've driven all the Rivians, and I'm a big fan of their products, and the future is really looking bright for them. So you got to see it in person. What is it like? How good is it? Are you excited about it?
So for just a little bit of historical background, right? The reason why I bought a Rivian and why I fell in love with the Rivian brand is at one point in time, they showcased a travel kitchen in their gear tunnel. It's called, look it up, there's videos. It's called the Camp Kitchen in the gear tunnel for the Rivian. It fit into that storage cargo space behind the seats, in between the truck bed and the seats, and it slid out. And not only was it like a well manicured, custom designed kitchen, but it had drawers with custom fit for specific utensils. They had a partnership with Snow Peak. It had a sink. It had a dual range.
Collapsible. It was amazing.
It was amazing. But you know what? We know Rivian had to sell cars and not kitchens initially out of the gates. And that thing cost $6,000. Look, I don't think there was a large enough
Plus, it only fit one of their cars, whereas this is fitting every car they make, including the ones that are upcoming. So
this new travel kitchen, it's called the travel kitchen. Think of it as just like a sandwich. It folds up, and then you open it up, and it rests along, like, whether it's a truck bed door or the rear tail door flattened down. You can put on any surface, really, as long as you have power. It could be on a picnic table. It supports every car. It even supports non-Rivian cars that just have a fold-out thing. But it's a lot more simplified. It's a 2-range induction stovetop. It has a little drawer for utensils, and then it has these 2 poles that you can add like some nice stringed LED lights. But it does need a power source to do it. I think from a versatility standpoint, it's smarter, but it doesn't captivate my heart like
I kind of wish I had the part that has the utensils in it. I wish I had a collapsible sink that would fold sideways out, so it would go past the tailgate, and you could plop it down and have maybe a water jug you connect to a thing, and then there's a pump in there and a little faucet that unfolds. I think they could have done a little better, especially for $1,400. I think the price, a lot of it is because of the induction cooktop's probably the most expensive part there. But yeah, I think it's I think it's a good Gen 1 product.
Yes.
I hope they evolve the concept into being even more versatile. Does it latch onto the tailgate in some way? I thought that in your video, I saw some hooks that go somewhere.
So it depends. Here's the interesting. It just depends on the car. So with the R1S, which is the SUV, which to me I'm just going to say it doesn't make as much sense to use because an SUV is a covered top.
Yeah, you're
so
gonna
the
get a lot of
vapors
smoke
are gonna
and stuff.
all get in there. Okay. Now as R1S has these hooks on the rear door that it kind of rests on, but with the R1T and other things, it just lays flat. And it actually on the R1S, at least the demo that I saw, it wasn't completely flat, but it can lay flat. But I think those hooks, however they were positioned, didn't make it lay flat. What to your point about a sync and everything, I was at the R2, R3 unveiling that Rivian did earlier.
Yeah.
I guess it was this year. Was it this year or last year?
Yeah, it was this
last
year.
It was this year.
Yep.
I know, right? Time flies. But what they had showed is they had showed pictures of their R2, and the R2 has a different system where there's kind of like an ability to put some sort of like a storage bin on the back. And what they had showed in images, we've never seen it in real life yet. They had the stovetop on the top of the trunk, but in this bin, it had a sink. It had dishes. So there might be a modular thing coming to the R2 that does not exist with the current form factor. And to your point, we need a sink. We want nice utensil storage, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so that I think that will be coming. But R2 is, I believe, expected in 2025 now.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll wait for that. And I don't think though that system, that storage, is going to be compatible with the R1 and the R1S and R1T only because they don't have any type of peg system to support container storage in the back. But we'll see how it evolves.
They could make it hook up to the receiver for the towing too.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
then it would be more universal.
True.
It'd be interesting to see how it goes, but I'm excited. I used to own a Volkswagen camper, and so it was a full camper with a kitchen and the fridge and everything.
Amazing.
And so I know what it's like to be in a modular, collapsible, everything gets rearranged every day you camp kind of thing, and I love it. And I'm really looking forward to see where Rivian takes stuff because I'm a big fan of their vehicles.
Oh man,
I'm jonesing for R3X personally. That's the one I
who
want.
Isn't?
I think for different reasons. I think a lot of people want it because, it looks very 80s and cool. That's part of the reason I want it. But also, I like performance cars.
Yes.
Like, my last EV was a Model 3 Performance. And I like cars that are very fast, that also are, very practical. And, I'm not into more like the higher end stuff. I like smaller, more compact size cars. So the R3X really kind of ticks all the boxes. It's got that nostalgia. It's got that performance. And the off-road stuff, I'm actually not that excited about myself, but I'll take it if it comes with it.
Exactly. You know what I think was really interesting to what you said about, earlier you talked about the trajectory of this company, right? For a while, we were like, where are they going to get their funding? All of a sudden, they partner up with Volkswagen.
I know.
Basically $1 billion each year now for like the next 5 years or so to kind of keep up the development, share some sort of information. I thought that was a genius thing. But what really sparked, when Rivian announced their new R2 and R3 and R3X, we first only thought they were going to do an R2.
Oh my God, I know.
But the R3 and R3X literally generated this momentum around the company that Rivian said, oh, the first R3 car that will be produced and on the market is the R3X. So that is just an amazing turn.
That makes
for a
sense
company.
from a profit perspective.
Absolutely.
Right? Always go with the high end first. Yeah.
But look, like they've had their R1 series out. They would have an R2 series out. You would think in general be like, okay, let's just get the basic R3 out just because it's, more approachable. But there's so much momentum around the R3X that they said, we're going to prioritize this. I love when companies listen, and it only gets people more excited. I don't know if I'll have the resources, but damn, R3X, my targets are on you too, because I love this car platform.
I'm definitely putting a deposit on it, that's for sure.
Yeah. But I just love to see how that's turned around for them. It's really exciting.
Yeah, like I did way back when the Model 3 was announced.
There you go. Yep.
Finally get, Listen, Brian, we should wrap up because I know you got to run. Do you want to tell folks real quickly where they can find you on the internet, your various social media handles, and also, your YouTube channel, all that good stuff?
Yeah, if you love tech, you love geek culture, just all the above, it's just search for me for Brian Tong, BrianTong. If you haven't seen my stuff before, I'm on Twitter. I'm on the IG, and obviously the YouTube is my main home. But thanks so much for having me, Miriam. I love this. Like, this was a fun conversation, and just like we literally could have talked for another hour, but I don't have another hour.
No, I know you're super tight on time. No worries at all, man. Thanks so much. You all know where to find me, folks. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL on all the socials. So please follow me there. That's Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, all that stuff. So you can chat with me and Brian about this podcast there. And then if you want to subscribe to the podcast, it's at mobiletechpodcast.com on all the major platforms. So please subscribe and tell your friends. If your app lets you rate or review the show, please consider doing that. There's a YouTube channel as well, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast, a bunch of hands-on videos, unboxings, that kind of stuff, just visual stuff to go alongside the podcast if you want it. And then if you want to help support me, there is a Patreon, patreon.com/TNKGRL. That's patreon.com/Tankgirl. I publish a video version of this podcast every week in advance of the audio that's free. And so for $5 a month, you can get the video version, see me and Brian. And, there's bloopers in there sometimes, extra content. So yeah, consider helping me out. There's other tiers as well. So patreon.com/TNKGRL. And I also want to thank our sponsor, IFA. Experience the latest innovations from leading brands in consumer electronics and home appliances at IFA, Innovation for All. This year's 100 Moments will celebrate IFA's 100th anniversary, combining history, culture, innovation, and imagination. And thanks again, Brian, for being my guest. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Miriam. We'll see you on the next event.
I hope so.
Yes.
All right, folks, stay tuned. We'll have another show soon. And until then, cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.